So today I'm talking about empathy versus fascism. So first, let's talk about what these terms mean, because they get thrown around a lot. So I'm going to explain what I'm talking about when I throw them around today. Uh, uh, when we talk about empathy, are we talking about a feeling? Are we talking about a skill? Are we talking about a universal human ability? Are we talking about a stance? Is this something that's different from compassion? Is it the same thing as compassion? So let's talk about some definitions here. Dictionary definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Literally, etymologically, it means in feeling, where sympathy means with feeling. The Wikipedia entry on empathy says it's generally described as the ability to perceive another person's perspective, to understand, feel, and possibly share and respond to their experience. There are other, sometimes conflicting, definitions of empathy that include, but are not limited to, social, cognitive, and emotional processes primarily concerned with understanding others. So let's go to compassion. Definition for compassion: sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings of misfortune or misfortunes of others. Wikipedia on compassion says compassion is a social emotion that motivates people to go out of their ways to relieve the physical, mental, or emotional pains of others and themselves. Compassion is sensitivity to the emotional aspects of the suffering of others. When based on notions such as fairness, justice, and independence, it may be considered partially rational in nature. This goes on to say compassion involves feeling for another and is a precursor to empathy, the feeling as another capacity, as opposed to sympathy, the feeling towards another. This is getting very muddy at this point and seems contradictory to me about which is before which. It goes on to say, in common parlance, active compassion is the desire to alleviate another's suffering. Compassion involves allowing oneself to be moved by suffering to help alleviate and prevent it. In psychology, an article in Clinical Psychology Review says compassion consists of three facets: noticing, feeling, and responding. So, as far as I can tell, trying to look up actual definitions just makes this more confusing because people are talking about all different levels of things when they use either of these terms, empathy or compassion. Um, some writers make sharp distinctions, like reserving the word empathy for literally feeling another person's emotions, or using compassion for the more cognitive processes, or a motivating force for action. Other people divide the term empathy up into categories and use emotional empathy for feeling someone else's emotions, cognitive empathy for the more mentalized version. And these distinctions can sometimes be useful and relevant. For example, if you're studying psychopaths or people with antisocial personality disorder, they have a deficit in emotional empathy. They can't actually identify other people's feelings intuitively or relate to them, but they can still learn cognitive empathy. They can learn to recognize signs of someone having a certain feeling and use that information for good or evil. Some use it in useful ways, and some use it to torment people. So it can be useful to make these distinctions, but for the purpose of this talk, given the almost complete overlap in definitions and the contradictions in what the distinctions are, I'm going to be treating empathy and compassion as interchangeable terms. If you want Anglo-Saxon equivalent of empathy or compassion, we could call it fellow feeling. That would be the Anglo-Saxon equivalent. Or we could just call it all kindness. That would be fine too. So right off the bat, I want to get into, I'm not talking about some little slice of what somebody's calling empathy. I'm talking about the whole range. Let's move on. What is fascism? Is it a political structure? Is it a political aesthetic? Not even a stance. Is it a stance? Is it different from totalitarianism? All right, once again, let's start with Wikipedia. Fascism is characterized by support for a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interests for the perceived interest of the nation or race, and a strong regimentation of society and the economy. Opposed to communism, democracy, liberalism, pluralism, and socialism, fascism is at the far right of the traditional left-right spectrum. All right. Fascism doesn't usually call itself fascism these days, or Nazism, or totalitarianism. It usually calls itself law and order, conservatism, tradition, liberty, patriotism, old fashioned respect, things like that. But these descriptions are all extremely conditional. Laws are applied only to undesirables, freedoms apply only to the select. Core constitutional principles and civil rights get ignored as inconvenient to the consolidation of power, and only certain aspects of the past are revered. Fascists want 1950s racial and gender norms, but not 1950s tax rates. They call themselves Christians, but they want Old Testament punishments for gay people, not New Testament callings to welcome immigrants and feed the poor. Composer Frank Wilhoit, this is sometimes attributed to a different Wilhoit, but it is actually a composer, wrote in 2018, conservatism consists of exactly one proposition, to wit, there must be in-groups whom the law protects but does not bind, alongside out-groups whom the law binds but does not protect. And those in-groups and out-groups may be racially delineated, they may be delineated by religion or class or level of education or national origin or gender presentation or any number of things. But there are people who get privileges and don't have to follow the laws, and there are people who don't get any rights and do have to follow the laws and get punished. And that is a fundamental principle of what we're seeing in what I feel comfortable calling fascism, what some people are calling, oh, I'm just a conservative. Conservatism literally means maintaining a status quo, not pushing for more extreme suppression of rights and greater cruelty. All of this is in fundamental opposition to empathy and to Christian scripture, for that matter, both of which teach us to treat others as we would like to be treated ourselves. In a similar contradiction, there's a recent popular book came out in 2024 called Toxic Empathy: How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion. And this book is about how applying empathy to politics is a bad thing, and actually Christians should be way more hard-hearted. This conclusion takes a lot of mental gymnastics, but modern conservative Christians are apparently up to it. So I haven't read that entire book, but I read some commentary on it and some selections from it, and I think I feel comfortable rejecting the entire contents. So what is the relationship between empathy and fascism? First of all, fascist regimes reject empathy. They present it as weak and stupid. This is because totalitarianism worships power by force. Fascists cannot comprehend any other form of power, shared power, any other way of influencing people other than force. And they can't comprehend the motivations or the courage of people who are driven by empathy instead of obedience and self-interest. There are a lot of people out there going, why are people going to these protests, and why don't they just stay home when ICE is out there? Don't they know any better? It's dangerous, obviously, so they should stay home. And those of us who are driven by wanting to protect others and protect civil rights are like, well, yeah, it's dangerous, but this is more important. I need to go out there and protect my neighbor. You know, I really admire people who are doing that. I am not currently doing that, but I'm at least talking about it. The second piece is that fascism must crush empathy in order to survive. If the populace has empathy, they will help and trust one another. They will cooperate in their mutual defense, and they'll refuse to follow orders to, say, turn in their neighbors. Fascism sneers at kindness as a childish thing. It is a childish thing. It's a thing everybody is supposed to have learned in kindergarten, right? Or maybe from Mr. Rogers. But if we're doing it right, it's not something we outgrow and discard. It's something that we build on and get more sophisticated about carrying out. We learn counting in kindergarten and adding in grade school, but that doesn't mean we stop counting and adding when we leave grade school. We go on to learn algebra, calculus. It's not even a highfalutin college thing. Like if we go to trade school, we're going to need to know how to convert inches and millimeters or calculate volume, whatever we need to do. The same with kindness. Well-adjusted adults don't stop being kind once they're powerful enough to get away with it. They use any power and privilege they have as tools to expand their ability to be kind. This is not something you leave behind. It is something you build. But conservatives back in 2009 squawked when Obama said that empathy was an important quality to consider in a Supreme Court justice. Many of them questioned Sonia Sotomayor's ability to be objective as a Supreme Court justice if she had the capacity to be compassionate. In retrospect, this is really appalling and revealing. Fascism demands conformity. It attempts to crush individual variation. Fascism sneers at joy and at earnestness. It prefers cynicism and fear. It reviles novel forms of art, preferring familiar forms that can be relied on to maintain existing power structures. So write your fanfic, trot your trot. Cringe is an illusion designed to keep you obedient. Art and love and happiness are good things. Ursula Le Guin once said, "The trouble is we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain." Just as fascism rejects empathy, conversely, a compassionate populace rejects and defies fascism. Compassion drives us to avoid use of force and threat. We don't want it used on us. We're not going to use it on other people. To provide protection and support to all members of society, to nurture diversity, to tend toward more egalitarian and less hierarchical social structures. Because we can picture ourselves in anybody else's shoes, we want those shoes to be comfortable and at least keep your feet warm and protected. Empathy enables mutual support, both emotional and practical, and it helps us help each other through the hard parts. Spider Robinson puts it like this: shared pain is lessened, shared joy is increased. Thus, we refute entropy. So somehow we can perform this magic if we come together in hard times, in good times. We get more out of it than each of us can put in. I won't say that compassion is what makes us human, because there are pre-human remains that show disabled community members were lovingly cared for decades. But I will say that's what allowed Neanderthals and early humans to survive. That ability and drive to support one another. And abandoning that is as destructive to the survival of our society and our species as abandoning intelligence would be. Game theory shows us that a forgiving tit-for-tat model is a winning approach to prisoner's dilemma. In real-world terms, this means something like assuming positive intent at first, cooperating unless someone shows they mean harm, and giving extra chances sometimes in case there was a misunderstanding. Being purely selfish isn't just not very nice, it's also less effective than being more generous. It results in worse outcomes on average for you personally, both in a pure game theory model and in real-world measurements. You can get short-term advantage, but it's not going to come out in the end better for you by being selfish. You're going to do better if you make alliances with other people, help other people, get other people to trust you. People who have no compassion, either innately or because they've learned to hold it in contempt, can't work together very effectively because they fundamentally can't trust each other and they can't understand the motivations of people who do. They have poor organizational structures and poor models of the world. This is the only advantage the good guys have over the bad guys. Selfish, cruel people can do all kinds of terrible things to win in the short term, but in the long run, sharing and kindness work better. ICE in Minnesota has cars and guns and tear gas and the president's blessing. But Minneapolis has community. The people of Minneapolis are standing up for their neighbors and for strangers, citizens or not. And there are a lot more of them than of ICE, and they work together better. And they know they're doing it for survival and for democracy, while ICE is just in it for cruelty and a paycheck. Some of the activist networks now in play were built in response to George Floyd's death in 2020. Minneapolis activists learned how to coordinate information and efforts in decentralized ways that didn't involve visible leaders who could be targeted. They're showing up to protest. They are bringing groceries to families who are afraid to leave their homes. They're blowing whistles and setting off car alarms when they see ICE attempt one of the abductions that they call arrests. And it's working. Activists have repeatedly reported ICE backing off when faced with a noisy camera-bearing crowd blocking their path to a target. It is all very risky, with ICE agents apparently willing to kill now. But it seems riskier to the body politic to let them act unchecked. So I wanted to share an image, a little contrast here with Alex Preddy, ICU nurse, and Renee Good, both of them shot by ICE agents recently. These look like nice people. They are nice people by all accounts from all the people who knew them. And these people are thugs. Anyway, so I would like to note at the end, empathy does a lot of things for us. It serves as an alarm system. Something is happening to my neighbor that I wouldn't want to have happen to me, so it's time to respond. It serves as part of an immune system. I heard about something that I wouldn't want to happen to me, so I need to fight it so it doesn't happen to any of us. And it serves as a way for groups to bond and work together to oppose cruelty and injustice and to support each other in hard times. Don't let anyone tell you it is a weakness. It is one of our greatest strengths.